I recently attended the May Day rally in Los Angeles.
Arrest him! The terrorist in our community!
Which was apparently invaded by a terrorist.
Well, I'm a veteran, and I support freedom of speech above all, because societies have to talk to each other, right? Yeah, my name's Eric, and I got jumped.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday!
And the irony is that this park commemorates the Hungarian Revolution, 1956, the Hungarian Spring. There's a statue right over there where they fought for the right to free speech and freedom of assembly.
Let's backtrack. I'm becoming an American. I'm excited. It's been a long time coming. I spent my formative years in this country and have had some of the best times of my life living here. As I get ready to take the Pledge of Allegiance, I find myself a little confused as to what side of the political divide I'm supposed to be on. One side tells me that the president is evil and a racist, but having met and listened to a lot of Donald Trump supporters, I find this hard to believe. More moderate leftists will tell me that most Americans are stupid and don't know the truth about him, and so they voted for him more out of ignorance than anything else. I also find this hard to believe. In my quest to better understand this problem and to see exactly what the left side of the cultural divide want, I thought I'd attend a rally. The last rally or protest I attended was back before the Iraq War kicked off. We were millions strong around the world with a unified voice saying, "No to war!" We didn't stop the war. The lack of anti-war rallies or protests over the past 2 presidential terms hasn't gone unnoticed by me, and I can only assume that President Obama's military operations in Syria and Libya were a little more popular on the left side of politics because of his social policies.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No.
The UN's migration agency interviewed West African migrants who told of being bought and sold in garages and car parks in the southern city of Sabah, one of Libya's main migrant smuggling hubs.
For critical thinkers, it begs the question, why is one Middle Eastern war decried as illegal and unjust, when 2 others that have caused immense suffering and destabilization are kind of ignored by the same group of people? When George W. Bush was president, the mention of more war sent liberals into a death spiral. These days, however, instead of protesting wars, the left protests the government to take away their rights.
Yesterday, survivors led a march on Washington. CBS News estimates the crowd topped just over 200,000 supporters.
So, what was this rally all about? May Day first got its start as a pagan fertility festival, but over the ages, its significance has evolved to where it's now recognised as an International Workers' Day, with festivities and rallies like this one organised by socialists and communists around the world. The rally organisers called for saving TPS, which stands for Temporary Protected Status, for refugees, which by its very definition cites it as a temporary program in lieu of natural disasters, political upheaval, war, that sort of thing. They called for less regulations on street vendors, more on that later, the saving of the DACA program, and of course, this. This rally had a couple of hundred people who were a gaggle of communists, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, some anarcho-socio-quasimodo whatchamacallits, a few LA trendies, and 1 American patriot. Terrorist. Silly me. Now I happen to be standing right next to this supposed terrorist. I know. It took a lot of courage.
Or unit or Burlington apartment is one of the...
Now language works best when we can agree on definitions. So, let's define terrorism. Looking it up in the dictionary shows that terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation
or unit or Burlington apartment is one of the...
especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims.
We all want to punch you, trust me. I'd love to punch you. I'd love to punch you. They're all sides.
There's a lot of prosperity.
Charming to the last.
There's a lot of prosperity
You only care about yourself.
There's more billionaires now these days. What is that telling us?
Shows that you give no shits about
There's a lot of greed.
It's a lack of empathy.
Yeah, my name's Eric, and I got jumped.
Is everyone who's a capitalist bad? Okay.
Oh, well, that's a relief. I guess maybe it's just American capitalists, or ones with flags. Seems like there's plenty of flags mixing with ideologies here, so what gives?
I guess the sight of an American flag causes some people to just kind of go 28 days later.
Quick, raise the terror level to orange! Do they even do that anymore? Here's one of our community volunteers. I didn't catch his name, but he sure looks like he's visited a Soylent truck or two.
He always acts bitchy and pissy, 'cause he is bloated from soy.
Soylent here explains why he and hundreds of people feel intimidated, threatened, and even terrorized by an American man holding an American flag in America.
Talking over them with this little megaphone is childish and petty.
Seguimos en paz. Tener una paz, una tranquilidad.
Here's Soylent showing his empathic superpowers as he helps subdue a terrorist. So what exactly did this guy do to provoke the wrath of the mob? Look, I get it. You're going to say that Eric here is trolling. A whole bunch of you are going to say that what he's doing is just so offensive and awful. He no doubt knew that bringing an American flag and a megaphone to a communist rally would likely bend some noses out of shape.
And this isn't my nose, it's a false one.
So if he's trolling, why should we feel bad that he got punched in the face and had his flag stolen? I mean, he was kind of asking for it, right? Wrong. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. The protesters and event volunteers would say that Eric here was trying to disrupt or prohibit their exercise of free speech. But time and time again, we see the far left doing exactly that, from college campuses to public media events and even faith-based rallies, holding counter-protests for well-respected authors, speakers, and even presidents. Yeah, they get a little bit violent, don't they? Whoops! Let's smash some ATMs. Yay! I hate banks unless they give me money. Oh, yes! Let's smash some windows. Woohoo! Oh, look, let's burn some stuff. Yeah, that's a good idea. It'll really stop the evil in its tracks. I haven't heard of too many libertarian, patriot, or constitutional groups throwing bags of feces and urine at their political enemies, but believe it or not, these sorts of tactics have been deployed on the left several times by groups such as Antifa. Yeah, feces and urine is a great way to stop fascism. Yeah, why don't we riot and destroy innocent people's businesses that they didn't build?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
It's no wonder young people lose faith in their institutions when they hear this kind of thing. Let's punch a Trump supporter. Yeah, anyone who's a Trump supporter is a Nazi, so punch a Nazi. Could be why our veteran here chose to wear a helmet. This guy's intimidation factor is quite low, as he's one man against hundreds. Now, I'm not saying that these people shouldn't have the right to protest. Quite the opposite. They absolutely do. And if they want to protest the evils of capitalism, then so be it. As a libertarian and classical liberal, I hold true to the notion that I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend until death your right to say it. The problem I have is not with the protesters' right to protest, it's with the hypocrisy of their actions. If you want to cry the evils of oppression, then don't be oppressive. If you want humanity to evolve, then start with yourselves. As an American veteran who is likely concerned with the goals of the far left, who call for such things as open borders, the dismantling of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, something he served to defend, the closing of prisons, sanctuary cities, the removal of a rightfully elected president described here in very sophisticated language, it's definitely his right to object publicly to the dismantling of his culture, as per the First Amendment. But you see, the far left would have you believe that his culture and belief systems are arbitrarily evil and unjust, and so, therefore, he doesn't have the right to protest. They use words like colonialism and imperialism as ammunition against someone who is in his own country defending his own way of life. Isn't coming to a country that you aren't a citizen of and making demands of its own population a little imperialistic in its own right? Did I miss something? Don't these immigrants want to be Americans? Isn't that why they're here? Millions of people want to come to this country every year with the hope to pursue their dreams and make something of themselves. So why is a man who is living their dream all of a sudden their enemy? At no point during this rally did our veteran here break the law. He didn't assault anybody. He didn't stop anyone else from exercising their free speech. His megaphone, as was previously discussed, was underpowered. He was, however, intimidated, surrounded, and blocked from moving by these protesters.
30.
Big Brother would be proud. Even though I was standing next to the guy when it all went down, I couldn't tell at the time what caused his head to fall forward and into our superhero here. However, coverage from another angle shows what I missed. I've never seen rage turn to cowardice so quickly. Catch that. Well, to these people, the American flag is a symbol of oppression and tyranny, so why not use oppressive and tyrannical methods to subdue it and anyone who has the audacity to proudly display it? Seems reasonably in line with everything else I've seen so far, but surely they don't want the police involved, the enablers of this oppressive and offensive system that... Of course they do. This all seems familiar somehow.
Well, we did do the nose. The nose? And the hat. But she's a witch!
Oh, they do have some empathy at least for the guy who threw the punch. Details. Rule number 5 from the communist playbook. Instigate a fight and then blame it on your victim. Doesn't get any more liberal and progressive than that. I guess it explains this sign.
That's a good idea. Abolish all prisons.
Don't get me wrong, I'm no fan of prisons. I don't think many people are. But I'm even less a fan of hardened and dangerous criminals roaming the streets with impunity. Given what we've seen here so far, however, it seems that ending prisons is the natural extension to these people's social philosophy, along with random acts of violence. So, what happened to our perpetrator? Punching a guy wearing a helmet can be risky. Hope he's not a hand model. And here's the police letting him go and telling him to take care. I wonder if that's code for don't assault people. Wow, this guy should write a book. He successfully managed to punch a law-abiding citizen in the face with the police watching and get a blessing from them.
That's right.
So let's recap. A veteran went to a rally on May Day to protest a bunch of communist protesters who went to protest the evil capitalist system they apparently can't live under. His freedom of movement was blocked. He was threatened. He was surrounded, provoked, and then punched in the face and tackled to the ground, where later he had his property stolen. The perpetrator, who suffered no consequence except a sore hand, was celebrated by the mob because in their minds he punched an American. A Nazi. So these Nazi punchers, who use Gestapo-style tactics, go out to protest the end to the same evil and oppressive system that ensures their right to protest, something which I might remind you is restricted in many other parts of the world, especially in communist countries.
Since Britain returned Hong Kong to China in 1997, many democratic groups and politicians say freedoms Beijing allowed Hong Kong as part of the handover deal agreed with London have gradually been eroded. The protests have sparked agitation that China may react as it did in 1989, when a similar peaceful student demonstration held around Beijing's Tiananmen Square was brutally crushed.
Because when I walked through the western part, the street, I was so startled that the whole street was blood.
They protest a flag that represents the country they have emigrated to, that's gratitude for you, a system that affords them police protection and impunity, and the closing of streets in downtown LA at peak hour for them to march on, something that goes against the collective because it's a major bummer for anyone else trying to get around. But hey, screw the collective if you're the wrong collective. The message they send is that while they call for an overthrow and complete restructuring of the government and economic system in a country most of them weren't even born in, is that anyone who disagrees with them and has the gall to stand up and make their disagreement heard is labelled a disgusting human being and a terrorist. Real progressive. Just using that term, progressive, as a virtue signal, unless you mean progressing towards an Orwellian nightmare populated by control freaks. Moral relativism is the position that moral or ethical propositions do not reflect objective and/or universal moral truths, but instead make claims relative to social, cultural, historical, or personal circumstances, which essentially means that as long as you have the right level of outrage at your enemies, or as long as you make the claim that you're a victim and have been badly done by, you can act with impunity. This is what we've seen here today, and I got to tell you, this philosophy is the enabler of evil, laziness, and ignorance. It muddies the waters of the social contract, creating division, racism, and victimization, which in turn creates a culture of exploitation, authoritarianism, and discrimination, the very things these commies say they're fighting. There's one word, I think, that best describes what occurred at this rally and what seems to frequently occur on the far left: hypocrisy. Talking about empathy, social justice, and unfair living conditions while at the same time committing acts of violence and intimidation is a surefire way to lose your credibility. If you really want to live in a full-blown socialist or communist country, there are options for you. North Korea is still going strong, so strong that most of the people living there are so malnourished they put up with an oligarchy that tolerates absolutely no dissent. A protest in this state results in prison time, if you're lucky. Or there's Venezuela, a little more towards the socialist side, but still no less enthralling. Here's a street vendor in Venezuela serving a socialist delicacy. Yes, for all you cat lovers out there, that is a woman butchering a cat on the street. Where else in the world but on the streets of a socialist utopia would you be able to enjoy the delicacy of fried feline with Che Guevara salsa and a dash of mayonnaise? Get it? Mayonnaise. Even in this cat-eater's paradise, the government is removing illegal immigrants, far from being the utopian refuge these people think it is. But hey, flying the North Korean flag while stealing and desecrating an American one is just another brand of social justice these extremists cling to in a desperate attempt to bring meaning to their philosophy of victimization and identity politics. It's one of life's little ironies that the word Mayday is used as a distress call. It was originally the idea of Frederick Mockford, who was a senior radio officer at Croydon Airport in London. He came up with the idea for Mayday because it sounded like the French word, m'aider, which means help me. Ironic, really, because people living under socialist or communist regimes around the world frequently find themselves in distress and looking for salvation from an ideology that, in the throes of its spasmodic and anti-human fits of authoritarianism, only ever brings denigration, destruction, and death. Thanks for watching.
There was 3 cops right in front of what happened, and they fucking doing nothing. What the fuck? I got there, man. Unido, vamos a ser vencidos, el pueblo